So week 3 is finally here, and it starts off with the Dolphins versus the Jags, and I'm previewing that game coming right up. What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gridiron Fantasy Football Podcast. Today is Thursday, September 24th, 2020, and I am Chip, I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share and support our podcast, you can find us over on Google and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and now we're on Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch our podcast, you can watch our podcast over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. So on today's episode, we're going to be previewing the Thursday night football game, the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Miami Dolphins. And this is going to be a very interesting game because generally, when you think about this game, we're like kind of a dud in the sense of the two teams that are playing, because you got two teams that, from a record standpoint, are not doing very well. But the Jacksonville Jaguars are a very interesting team to watch. They did a very good job in week 2 keeping Tennessee close, and unfortunately they were unable to win that game. But Gardner Minshew looks good, and the rest of that team is coming around. So they're not playing like a team that's trying to get Trevor Lawrence. But before we get into that game, let's go over some of the news that's taken place. We know that obviously like Saquon Barkley, he's going to be on IR because of a torn ACL. He's going to have surgery in a few weeks to repair that. So he should be able to have enough time to be able to come back strong for next season. Typically the ACL recovery, based on the person, based on the surgery, it could be 9 to 12 months based on how everything goes. So Saquon Barkley, he's a freak athlete. He's just a freakish human being. So I have no question that he'll be back for 2021 in full health and ready to go. We know Christian McCaffrey, he's on IR right now with the designation to return. He'll be back in 6 to 8 weeks. So Mike Davis is the guy that's going to take the role there until McCaffrey comes back. But back to the New York Giants. I mean, we know that in the waiver wire this week, Dion Lewis was a hot commodity, and we saw that people were going after him, and then the Giants went out and signed Devontae Freeman. So I'm kind of curious at how they're going to use Dion Lewis. We all know there was some talk about Wayne Gallman being another option. We know Freeman's not going to be able to take a lot of snaps because he just got to New York and he is learning the offense. So I can see him getting a few snaps here and there, but it looks like the snap count will be between Wayne Gallman and Dion Lewis. Not really sure how that's going to play out between those two, because we saw in Indianapolis when Hines was the hot commodity, for after the week 1 matchups, he didn't do anything in week 2. So I'm nervous that this may happen to Dion Lewis, where a lot of people spent a lot of their fab budget on Hines or on Lewis, and then may not get the hope that they need in the sense of fantasy, production. So we'll see what happens. But going on to some of the injury news that's taking place this week, very weird story coming out of Los Angeles with the Chargers. We all knew that Tyrod Taylor was out on Sunday from a surprising inactive, because we saw Justin Herbert start. We had no idea why he was starting, and there wasn't any news on what was going on. And now we come to realize that he was actually getting a pain injection shot when the doctor accidentally punctured his lung, which collapsed the lung, which caused him to have to go get some medical attention, all that. So very, very weird story. I'd never heard of that before, in a sense of like a football player having, a pain injection, and all of a sudden it punctures the lung and causes the issues that Tyrod Taylor's having. But as of right now, the Chargers are gonna start Justin Herbert, but I hope that Tyrod Taylor's gonna be fine. He should have a full recovery, but it just sucks that every time he has the opportunity to start, something happens to him where he can't start, and then he loses his starting job. But it looks like Anthony Lynn in Los Angeles really wants to have Tyrod Taylor, start. So it depends on, how long it takes for him to recover. But hopefully Tyrod Taylor is fine after, a few weeks. But just a very interesting and just weird story going out in Los Angeles. So, and then on the other side of Los Angeles, there's Malcolm Brown and Cam Akers. On Wednesday, they both did not practice. And when you see a lot of these practice reports on Wednesday, generally this is veterans rest. Usually a lot of these guys who get banged up on Sunday and Monday usually have Wednesday to kind of rest their body. So really you want to pay attention to what goes on Thursday and Friday, because those are the 2 days where those players who are on the injury report for this week, their involvement in practice determines obviously what they do on Sunday, if they're activated or not. So I expect the guys on this list, majority of these guys are going to play, but you never know based on what's going on. So, and this is, pertains to like now going on to Josh Jacobs and Darren Waller. Josh Jacobs injured his hip on Monday night, and then Darren Waller apparently is dealing with a knee ailment. With that being the case, Josh Jacobs came back into the game, so he injured his leg in the fourth quarter. He got stretched out on the sideline, and then he went back and finished the game. So I don't expect this to be a thing that was going to cause Josh Jacobs to miss any time, but it's just something to look at just in case something does change throughout the week. And then obviously Michael Thomas, he did not practice on Wednesday. No one expects him to play on Sunday. It looks like that injury is going to take some time to heal, so Michael Thomas will be out again in week 3. And then Kenny Golladay, finally a kind of a hope of Kenny Golladay being able to play on Sunday. He finally practiced a little bit on Wednesday. It was limited, but at least he was out there practicing. So hopefully he has a better participation on Thursday and Friday. So it gives us a clearer indication if he's going to play on Sunday. And then Julio Jones, I mentioned this in the podcast on Tuesday, is that, I think there's something more going on with Julio Jones that people, didn't realize. And then even Dirk Cutter, the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, really kind of said that, saying, look, I think Julio Jones kind of held things back and didn't really tell us how bad the injury was, because the way he's starting off the season, he definitely is not the Julio Jones of what we know. So there's some type of ailment there. So if you're able to get Russell Gage off your waiver wire this week, he may be a very good play, because Julio Jones doesn't seem to be healthy. And just continue to look at the practice reports to determine like if he's going to play or not. And then George Kittle, this is going to be an interesting thing that happens on Sunday as well. George Kittle didn't practice on Wednesday, which, like I was saying, like those are going to be things that happen on Wednesdays with veterans. But the story came out on Wednesday that he could be held out of Sunday's game against the New York Giants, because the New York or the San Francisco 49ers played the New York Jets on Sunday, and a lot of injuries took place. And then the 49ers have to go back to the same stadium, MetLife Stadium, to play the New York Giants. And they're fearful, the San Francisco 49ers are fearful that the field conditions cause a lot of these injuries. So they wanted NFL officials to look at the actual field to determine if it was playable to have the game on Sunday. And George Kittle dealing with a knee injury already, the 49ers are probably going to play this smart and not play George Kittle on that field, because we don't want to see him go out for the season either. So with that being the case, if you have Jordan Reed on your roster, if you're a George Kittle owner, you're able to get Jordan Reed, hold on to Jordan Reed, because there's a chance that he may be starting if George Kittle is going to be inactive. So just something interesting to look at, throughout the week. And then in Pittsburgh, Juju and Deontay Johnson both held practice on Wednesday. Juju's dealing with the knee. Deontay Johnson's been dealing with the toe. The last couple of weeks he has a toe injury, but he played last week, so he had a good game, and I think that he'll still play this week. But just like I said, always something to monitor. And then this is an unfortunate story out of Philadelphia. Jalen Reagor, the rookie wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, he tore his UCL, which is the ulnar collateral ligament that's in your thumb. Same injury that Drew Brees had. So Drew Brees missed 5 games because of it. Reagor, because he's a wide receiver, he could miss less time because of it. But it just sucks because he's such a promising wide receiver. He had all the tools to be able to be the number one for Philadelphia. And unfortunately, he's just unable to make that happen. So if you have him on your roster, hopefully you have an IR spot to stash him. But I had to drop him because I don't have an IR spot that I could have put him on. So I went ahead and dropped him, and I picked up Mike Williams. So just one of those things is unfortunate. Hopefully he is able to have somewhat of a decent rookie season after injury. And then last, Tennessee Titans wide receiver A.J. Brown did not practice again on Wednesday. So it's not looking good that he's going to play on Sunday. So that being the case, if you're able to pick up Corey Davis or Adam Humphries, those are 2 guys that you could plug and play if you need the wide receiver help, if you don't have anybody else to put in there. But it sucks. I'm an A.J. Brown owner. I have him in 2 of my main leagues, and I love him. He's one of my favorite players to watch. So it's just unfortunate. But now going into the Thursday night matchup, you got the Dolphins visiting the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this is a game that the Jags are favored by 3 points. They have an over-under of 47. And, every matchup of the week, I go through all the matchups, and I give you who I think are good starts, players that you can play in the flex, the BoomBus players that you could try to play to see if you get a good game out of them, and then just sits for these games. And today I'm just going to preview, obviously, the Thursday night football game. So in this game, I think the starts in this game is Gardner Minshew. I think he starts off with this list of a guy that you can play. I think Gardner Minshew is having a great season. He's so far in the first 2 weeks of the season, he's been a fringe QB1. He had a great game against the Titans, and I think, Gardner Minshew has proven people wrong that he's a decent football player, that, from a fantasy standpoint, he's a guy that definitely is becoming a streamable guy weekly and even starting, every week. And especially, obviously, if you're in a 2-quarterback league, you're starting Gardner Minshew. There's no reason not to start him. He's giving you every reason to start him. I'm a person that if I owned him in a league, I'm starting him until he shows me I can't play him, So right now, Gardner Minshew, he's in my lineup if I'm in a 2-quarterback league. And even if I'm in a 1-quarterback league, this is a good matchup where I think you'll be happy what Gardner Minshew does this week. And then another guy that I think is a start is DJ Chark. I think if you drafted DJ Chark in your draft, based on your strategies, either your wide receiver 1 or your wide receiver 2. But the downside to this is that he is dealing with the injury. So you got to be careful on who you have going on your roster, because if he just surprisingly is not going to be active for week 3, hopefully you have somebody to replace him. But there's no indication that he is not going to play. I think they just give him a lot of load management just to help with his injury. But I think DJ Chark plays, and I think it's a good matchup against the Dolphins where I think he should have a good game. And then James Robinson, I think he's a start too. I think that he's shown the last 2 weeks, he's definitely the lead back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's getting the majority of the carries. He's catching passes. I mean, last week he had 21 PPR points. So James Robinson is a guy that I feel comfortable playing now, because he's shown me that he's definitely the lead back in the Jacksonville Jaguars backfield. And then the tight end position, I think in this game is a must start, is Mike Gesicki. Had a great game against the Buffalo Bills, last week. He led the Dolphins with target share and with, overall receiving. Like I said, in my earlier podcast in the week, that Shane Gilly loves using their tight ends in the slot. And Mike Gesicki is having a big target share. He's leading the Dolphins with target share. He is, I think, has like 79% of his snaps in the slot. So they're going to find mismatches, and I think that this is going to be a game for Mike Gesicki. When it comes to my flex options for this week, Devontae Parker is one of those guys. Devontae Parker does have a good matchup. He's playing against Trey Herndon, who's the Jacksonville Jaguars slot guy. He out of all the 3 wide receivers for the Miami Dolphins, he has the best matchup if this is the guy he gets lined up to, with throughout the game. But with that being the case, he had a good game last week. He had a touchdown, and he was going against Tre'Davious White. So going against one of the shutdown corners in the league, he had a decent game. And then when it comes to a flex option as well, is Myles Gaskin. Myles Gaskin has been having a good season so far. Everyone's talking about Jordan Howard and Matt Breida, but if you look at what's going on with Miami, Gaskins has been leading the Miami backfield. He right now has 16 carries for 86 yards, so not big numbers, but it's the workload that he's getting. So he's averaging yards per attempt is 5.4, so he's definitely getting the job done. He's missing, he's forcing 5 missed tackles so far this year. So I think this guy is someone that you can play. When it comes to receiving, he's a PPR guy. So right now, there's only 2 guys that have 10 plus, receiving receptions in, this season. That's Myles Gaskin and that's Alvin Kamara. So look at that. I mean, he has 10 receptions for 62 yards. So I think this is a guy that is a very undervalued guy so far. I think he's a guy that you definitely can play in your flex if you need the help. If you're a guy who lost McCaffrey or Barkley and you weren't unable to get Deion Lewis, you're able to get Darrell Henderson, you were able to get Mike Davis. Gaskin is another guy, if you really need the running back help, you can probably put him in your flex and feel comfortable about that. So he's a guy that I think deserves to be looked at for this week. And then my BoomBus players for this game, Preston Williams. I'm a big fan of Preston Williams, but he's just not looking as good this year. He's a guy that I may have to play in my own league because I lost Jalen Reagor. I have A.J. Brown on my bench because of an injury. So we played 3 wide receivers. So I may have to play either my options are Allen Lazard, Mike Williams, or Preston Williams. And right now I think Preston Williams has the better matchup. So he may be a guy that I'm playing. But it's just one of those things that it's a hit or miss. This is why I put these guys in this section, because you just never know what's going to happen. You have expectation if he does not do anything. You knew that probably was going to be the case. But if he has a great game, obviously it helps your fantasy week. So another guy is the Jacksonville Jaguars second wide receiver, Laviska Shenault Jr. He's a rookie wide receiver who's so far the second wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who has had a decent season. I think he's a guy that you could play if you need the help at wide receiver if you're playing in a deeper league. And I think you can play Keelan Cole too. He's one of the hot waiver wire pickups this week. And I think if you look at what's going on across the board for the Jacksonville Jaguars, is that they all have favorable matchups across the board. So I think that regardless of who you have on your team, I think they're a good play because, both Jacksonville and Miami have bad pass defense and bad total defense. So I think this is a game where you may see a high scoring game because they can't guard anybody. So I think it'll be a very interesting game to kind of see what happens with these guys. But, like I said, it's a Thursday night game. We rarely get good Thursday night games. Last week, the Browns versus the Bengals was one of the very first Thursday night games. Was very fun to watch. So who knows how ugly this game will be. But with the bad defenses on both sides of the ball, and with the Miami Dolphins have a bad secondary where it makes favorable matches for the Jacksonville Jaguars, it could be a high scoring game in the sense where the game scripts may be beneficial for the Dolphins if the Jacksonville Jaguars take a lead and the Dolphins have to play from behind. A guy that I'm going to sit in this game, Ryan Fitzpatrick's one of those guys. Unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, it's one of those things where you're not going to play him. But he definitely has some stream appeal this week based on the matchup. But I'll look for better options rather than playing Ryan Fitzpatrick. But I know if you're desperate, if you really need the help, but there hasn't been any really quarterbacks out there that have been injured this year, so you should be able to have a better option to start than Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then I'm benching Matt Breida and Jordan Howard. I'm not gonna mess with that backfield, other than I think I'm gonna play Gaskin if I need to. But other than Jordan Howard getting the goal line carries, I think that these are two guys I'm not gonna play. You can probably go ahead and drop those two guys because I think Gaskin's at some point going to just take over the role completely. But that being the case, that is my preview for the Thursday night football game. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars win this pretty easily. So, that's it for today. If you have any questions for start and sits for week 3, my email is chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com. I'll leave that down in the description. But on Friday, I'll be going over the rest of the matchups for week 3 along with my starts and sits. So, thank you so much for listening today. Please like, comment, and share this podcast. On the next episode, like I said, I'll be going over the rest of the week 3 matchups. But don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of those episodes. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us over on Twitter and Facebook at the Gridiron Pod, and on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys have hope the Thursday night game goes well for you. You got to play anybody, and hope that you start off your fantasy week with a lot of points. So have a good day and take care.